Good day, everyone. We are the Group 1, and today we will be discussing about the research problem and variables. I am Maria Apriline B. Alba, and together, my group mates, Mr. Kenneth Pulkiran, Miss Angel Marie Rendon, and Cleo Angelique Ruel. So, in this, we will discuss the research problem and the variables. So, what will be included in our discussion here, and then for the variables. So first is, what is a research problem? Next, what is the need for this study? And then what problem influenced the need to undertake this study? For the variables, what is variables and the types of variables? And then lastly is the conclusion. So now let's proceed about the research problem. Okay, so let's proceed to the research problem. So what is exactly a research problem? So a research problem is exactly that, a problem that someone would like to research. It is a problem, can be anything that a person finds unsatisfactory or unsettling. It is a difficulty of some sort or a state of affairs that needs to be changed, and anything that is not working as well as it might. So it is sometimes or basically a problem that involves areas of concern to all of researchers. It is a condition they want to improve on their research, and the difficulties that they want to eliminate, questions also for which they seek answers. So for researchers and students alike, research problems are usually identified from several sources, including A, the research literature, B, the problems in practice or work-related contexts, and lastly, C, personal biography or history such as current or past personal experiences or identities, race, ethnicity, gender, class background, family, costumes, religion, and so forth. So next, in applied social science research, problems arises from issues, difficulties, and current practices in real-life situations. So the research problem in a study begins to become clear when the researcher asks, what is the need for this study? Or what problem influenced the need to undertake the study? So for example, schools may not have implemented multicultural guidelines. The needs of faculty and colleges are such that they need to engage in professional development activities in their departments. Minority students need better access to universities, or a community needs to be better understand the contributions of its early female pioneers. These are all significant research problems that merit further study and establish a practical issue or concern that needs to be addressed. So, when designing the opening paragraphs of a proposal, Ms. Rendon will discuss about the research tips. So, Ms. Rendon.
Let's move on to the research tips. So when designing the opening paragraphs of our proposal, which includes the research problem, always keep in mind these research tips. First, write an opening sentence that will stimulate reader interest as well as convey an issue to which a broad audience can relate. Second, as a general rule, refrain from using quotations, most especially the long ones, in the lead sentence because it will be difficult for readers to grasp the key idea you would like to be possibly shown or for them to see. Quotations raise many possibilities for interpretation and thus create unclear beginnings. And step away from idiomatic expressions or trite phrases. For example, the lecture method remains a sacred cow among most college and university instructions. So stay away from sacred cow because this is an idiomatic expression. And next, consider numeric information for impact. For example, as like every year, an estimated 5 million Americans experience the death of immediate family members. So every year, next year, 1 year. So next, clearly identify the research problem, such as dilemma or issue that leading to the study. Indicate why the problem is important by citing numerous references that justify the need to study the problem. And make sure that the problem is framed in a manner consistent with the approach to research in the study. And lastly, consider and write about whether there is a single problem involved in the proposed study or multiple problems that lead to a need for the study. And these are the considerations in formulating the research problem. These are the following. An external criteria, always consider that it is novelty. When we speak about novelty, this refers to the practical value of the problem due to its newness in the field of inquiry. Availability of the subjects. This refers to the people with desired capability and willingness to participate in the study. And the support of academic community. This refers to the assistance given by someone else of the institution. This refers to like the teachers, staffs, students, parents, and among others. And the availability and adequacy, facilities, and equipment. These are the devices such as computers, telephones used in undertaking the study must always be considered. And next is the ethical considerations. These include avoidance of the research problem that pose unethical demands on the part of the research participants.
Now let's proceed about the internal criteria. So, internal criteria includes first is the experience, training, and qualifications of the researcher. This means that the constitution of the researcher's knowledge and expertise as a result of experience in the study. Next is the motivation, interest, intellectual curiosity, and perspectiveness of the researcher, meaning these are essential attitudes that bring anticipated satisfaction or enjoyment in the completion of research tasks. More example is the time factor. So this considers the fact that studies must be pursued within a given time frame. For example, our CBOR, we have a time frame that will be needed so that we will pass on time. So next is the cost and returns. These factors matter in choosing a research problem. Research is an expensive undertaking, so the amount of funding needed, after all, it depends on the size of a sample, the place where the research is to be conducted, the treatment of data, and the kind of the research design. And then lastly, for the internal criteria is the hazards, penalties, and handicaps. This is depend upon the research physical and intellectual capacity and moral judgment.
Now, let's proceed with the research variables. Each person or thing we collect data on is called observation. In our research work, these are usually people or what we call the subjects, and they possess a variety of characteristics. So what is a variable? A variable is a characteristics or feature that varies or changes within the study. Variable is a term normally used for research works and have more than one value such as gender, eye color, achievement, motivation, running speed, weight, height, anxiety level, income, body temperature, and so on. Notice that individual members in this class of objects, however, must differ or vary to qualify the class as a variable. If all the members of the class are identical, we do not have a variable. Such characteristics are called constants. Since the individual members of the class are not allowed to vary, but rather are held constant. In any study, some characteristics will be variables, while the others will be constant. Researchers choose certain variables to investigate because they suspect that these variables are somehow related and believe that discovering the nature of these relationships, if possible, can help us make more sense out of the real world in which we live in. Now let's proceed with the types of variables. First is the quantitative variable versus the categorical variables. Quantitative variables are numerical. They represent the measurable quantity. There are two obvious examples, such as the height and the weight. In contrast, categorical variables do not vary in degree, amount, or quantity, but rather are qualitatively different. Examples include eye color, gender, religious preference, occupation, position on a baseball team, and most kinds of research treatment or methods. Now, let's proceed with the independent variables versus the dependent variables. Independent variables are those that the researcher chooses to study in order to assess their possible effects on one or more other variables, while the dependent variables are variables that the independent variables is presumed to affect. In short, the dependent variables depend on what the independent variable does to it, how it affects it. For example, a researcher studying the relationship between childhood success in mathematics and adult career choice is likely to refer to the former as the independent variable and subsequent career choice as the dependent variable. As shown below, the independent variable is presumed or possible cause, and it affects the dependent variable, which is the presumed results.
Well, a variable in science can be anything. More specifically, in an experiment, a variable can cause something to change, be the result of something that changed, or be controlled so it has no effect on anything. Variables that cause something to change are what we call independent or the manipulated variables. Sometimes researchers select an independent variable that already exists. The researcher must locate and select examples of it, rather than creating it. They can be either categorical or quantitative. So here are the few examples of the some possible relationships between a selected independent variable and a dependent variable. So next are moderator variable. Is a special type of independent variable. It is a secondary independent variable that has been selected for study in order to determine if it affects or modifies the basic relationship between the primary independent variable and the dependent variable. So here are the example of the research question that contains moderator variable. As you can see, the inclusion of the moderator variable in a study can provide considerably more information than just studying a single independent variable alone. Next is the mediator variable. Is one that attempts to explain the relationship between the two other variables in a way in which an independent variable impacts a dependent variable. It's part of the causal pathway of an effect, and it tells you on how and why an effect takes place. If something is a mediator, it causes the independent variable, and it influences the dependent variable. Next is the extraneous variable, are independent variables that have not been controlled. So here are some possible extraneous variables. Once researchers have decided which variables to study, they must be concerned about the influence or effect of other variables that exist. Therefore, the task is to control these extraneous variables, somehow to eliminate or minimize their effect. Because if left uncontrolled, extraneous variables can lead to inaccurate conclusions about the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable.